Good evening, everybody. Sorry, we were waiting for one last commissioner, so we're going to start without her. Okay, here comes the gavel. Okay, that's better. Okay, so we were going to wait for one last commissioner to come, but we're going to start without her. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And tonight we're going to discuss the draft Plan of Conservation and Development. And Katie, would you like to make any comments?
Yes. Hi, good evening,
Pictures is all that matters, no.
My name is Katie DeLuca, and I am the Director of the Planning and Zoning Department, and I'm so thrilled to be here, I guess 3 years later, 2 and 3/4 years later, from when we first started this, and here we are finally at the public hearing, soon to be at the RTM, I hope. So welcome, and thank you so much for coming. I know it is cold, and I am going to go through the presentation because I assume some people are at home cuddled up watching this on TV. So for their benefit and for yours, even though I think most of you have probably seen this presentation as you were at the public workshop a month or so ago, I will just go through it assuming that you're not familiar with it. So this evening, what we want to do is just briefly go over what is in the plan. Hopefully, most of you have read the whole thing or at least flipped through it. So we'll go through the purpose of the plan. Then we will discuss how the plan was written, the structure and the content. And then most importantly, we'll get your comments on this draft. So this document is a land use document. Excuse me. Don't need that. And it is a requirement of the town charter. It is also a requirement of the state statutes, but as you know, we are a home rule community, which means that we follow our town charter in this planning function. And that does call for us to establish a vision for our community as it relates to land use issues. This plan is very important in that we use it in our budget process. We use it to determine whether or not a municipal improvement, such as a new school, or playing fields, any major reuse of land is appropriate under our land use plan. We use it to determine what zoning regulations we should adjust, and of course the zoning regulations dictate our built environment. And it is a requirement in order to qualify for many grants. So as you can see, it's far stretching and an important part of our community plan. And it is a requirement, at least we believe it is, that the community as a whole write this plan. It is not just the work of the Planning and Zoning Commissioner, of the First Selectman, or even of the RTM. So a very important part of this whole process, starting from the very beginning, was public outreach. So much so that before we even hired a consultant, we went before the Land Use Committee of the RTM and said, what are the issues that are important? That was brought up as an important issue to make sure that we could get as much comment as possible. And we hired a consultant who we thought did a very good job of helping us get as much information as we could from as many people as we could. And that involved stakeholder meetings, that involved large meetings, small meetings, RTM meetings, neighborhood groups, garden clubs, luncheons. There was even a Super Bowl party thrown in there. And we got a lot of information. And from there, we drafted the plan. And then we went back and forth with as many people as we could to get as much input as we could on those various drafts until we formulated it into an actual working document, which we released over the summer. After that, we've had 2 or 3 iterations based on public comment, and now here we are this evening reviewing the October 22nd draft. As you see when you go through it, it starts with kind of a hierarchy, actually. It starts with the vision statement, which is the overall vision for the community. Talks about planning assumptions and what kind of guided our thought process. We then talk about 6 guiding principles, which are effectively our chapters within the plan. Within each guiding principle, you will find objectives and action items, and at the end is the all-important implementation schedule. I say that because no plan is as good is only as good as its implementation. So we did spend a lot of time actually through those drafts, which I'll go over in just a minute, fine-tuning that implementation plan based on public feedback. I'm just going to read this vision statement because it is important. It is to preserve Greenwich as a premier residential community by enhancing our exceptional neighborhoods, schools, environment, cultural and recreational amenities, while focusing investment in the town's infrastructure, school facilities, storm resiliency measures, and the downtown core as the means to increasing the town's value. As I said, it goes into a hierarchy from there, so that's the overriding vision for our land use plan. From there, we get into these 6 guiding principles. The first one is to preserve our unique character, community, and sense of place. As I mentioned, we went out to many different groups. No matter what group we visited, this business about community character always came up. Now, of course, that means different things to different people, so we spent a lot of time asking, what does that really mean? How can we put that thought process in the plan and have it resonate with people and have it mean something as we go through the various ways that we implement the plan, meaning the budget, the MI, the zoning regulations, and the grants. And in this particular section where we have objectives and action items, we talk about making sure that we have regulations, zoning regulations I'm referring to, that are easy to understand and that people understand what it means when we talk about the various ways to control the bulk in our community, control the density, control the location of certain uses, and we want to be as clear as we possibly can. We spent a lot of time talking about landscape guidelines, and when we talk about sense of place, what we mean by that is creating something that is unique to Greenwich. We all know when we are in Old Greenwich, we know when we're in Glenville. Just think to yourself for a minute what that means, and that's what sense of place is. And we want to do that with landscaping, particularly through the Post Road corridor. So that's an area where we want to look at both the public and the private areas and look at a way to enhance that corridor and beautify that corridor. That also plays into the streetscape plan. And other areas include scenic roads, new signage and lighting regulations, an emphasis on public art, and on village districts. Village districts is something that the commission tool that the commission can use from the state statutes that allows us to work with a particular area, a village, if you will, such as Byram or Greenwich, and create a sense of place and create landscape and streetscape design for that particular village. An example of that actually just in Connecticut is the Silvermine area in Norwalk. If you just think to yourself, if you've been there, they were able to do a lot of what they've done there through the village district. The second guiding principle is developing housing opportunities for the future. So there we talk about age in place options, affordable housing, workforce housing, hidden housing. Hidden housing is a nice way to solve all 3 of the problems that I just mentioned. And that's things like accessory apartments in single-family homes, so where you wouldn't know that there's an accessory apartment that is either for an elderly person or that is deed restricted for rent. We have that in our zoning regulations now. It's not as widely used as we would like, so that's an area that we can focus on. Other areas for hidden housing include adaptive reuse. So if you have an existing building such as the Mill in Glenville, that was an office building for many years, and they came in recently and they want to convert that building, were approved to do so, into apartments. So that's an example of how we can maintain our sense of place and our community character and do that without too much disruption to the visual within that area. And also working with the housing authority. When you read through that section, you'll see that that's a big area that we want to focus on to help us continue with our affordable housing goals. And I say that because the majority of the affordable housing that we have in town has been through development by the housing authority. There are some private developments that also meet those goals, but that's clearly an area where we can continue to work together to increase our numbers. Third is top quality educational facilities. Things that we hear about a lot in the news, need for playing fields, facility upgrade, and ensuring that while, of course, schools are of utmost importance in the community, they help drive the value of a community, they help promote why someone would want to move to a community as good schools, but at the same time, they are in our neighborhoods, and we want them that way. We don't want them in commercial areas, but we also don't want them to have a negative impact on our neighborhoods. So we want to make sure that that balance is correct and thought through, and if there are improvements done at the schools, that there's conversely increase in buffers to make sure that that relationship stays intact. Sustain and improve our natural environment and landscape. This is a large section, as you'll see. There's always more that can be done with ensuring that we have a premier residential community that focuses a lot on environmental issues. We have a drainage manual that is very robust, and it's actually a document that is looked at a lot throughout the state as a model, and we also are part of Sustainable Connecticut. Many more towns have now met the highest level under the Sustainable Connecticut program, Greenwich being one of the first. Clean energy, coastal resiliency, connections between open space parks are areas that you'll see within the plan. Maintaining economic vitality in thriving commercial centers. Even though we are predominantly a residential community, of course, it is important that we support the commercial areas, and that conversely, the residential is supported by the commercial. So the downtown area where we hear a lot about an abundance of issues within a downtown. On the one hand, you hear that there's nothing but vacancies and what happened to the post office, and people are moving to the downtown, but at the same time, if you look at the population numbers, it's actually a decrease within the downtown. You also hear about parking issues there, so where no one wants to go to these vacant stores, there's also seemingly a large parking issue. It's like a Yogi Berraism, but so there's always something happening in the downtown, so that's something that we believe in. We believe in our downtown, not just downtown proper in Greenwich, but also in the villages. It's an important part of, again, what we talk about community character and this sense of place, and we want to make sure that we are focused on those areas. And lastly, the last guiding principle is to provide the best quality infrastructure, municipal facilities, cultural institutions, and health services. We spent a lot of time, as I mentioned, going out to various groups. That included the Greenwich Hospital, and the health services industry was of importance to us. Not just the financial industry was what people naturally think of as prominent in Greenwich. We looked at ensuring that we have the infrastructure. So we talked a lot with the Department of Public Works and made sure that what we were looking at as a community met our infrastructure existing and proposed. And the important overall takeaway in the plan as it relates to land use is that we have a very well-established land use pattern, and there is no desire for any radical change of that land use pattern at the moment. Having said that, things change quickly. As I mentioned before, there's a big market-wise, there's a drive for people to move downtown. That's a change that we've seen in recent years. So it's an important thing for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the community as a whole to stay on top of these trends and to follow them and to make necessary adjustments, but not react rashly to these trends. So to that end, one of the big innovations in this plan over what has been done in previous years is a focus on the future planning initiatives. As you know, we are a planning and zoning commission, and I think one of the criticisms that we've heard frequently over the last 10, 15 years is there's not enough planning in planning and zoning. And if you read this plan, I think you will be very moved by the emphasis that is in this plan with respect to planning. And we've spent the last about 5 years or so making adjustments in our zoning regulations and trying to make them as efficient as possible so that the department runs efficiently, so that we can focus more on planning both inside the department, but also to be able to foster the relationships with you all. Part of what we've done through the last 2 years is what we want to continue doing, which is having a very close relationship with the community. We are a very resource-rich community, and that's always been one of our strengths, and we want to capitalize on that even more moving forward. So when you read through the planning section in the plan, you'll see what I mean by that, that something will resonate with you, and we'll be asking you to help us with that area. For example, municipal indicators. We want to make sure as we proceed along that we are tracking how we are doing. And we want to create key municipal indicators. This is not particularly innovative or interesting, generally speaking, but it is as it relates to Greenwich, because we've not really done it as it relates to land use before in the past. So it's something that we want to focus on going forward. We've done it financially, but not as it relates to land use as a whole. So what those indicators are is obviously a key question, and that's something that we will be developing in the near future. A big change in this plan relates to the implementation. So what we want to do and what we propose in the plan is reviewing this every 2 years. So we think of the Plan of Conservation Development as a 10-year document. The reason for that is the state statutes note that each municipality in the state has to at least review their plan every 10 years. The town charter, which we follow, has no timeline associated with when one must review a plan. We think it's important, particularly with how fast things change nowadays, that we check in regularly with the RTM, and regularly we've chosen every 2 years. So we want to meet at least annually with the RTM and report to them as to how we're doing, either with our key municipal indicators or where we are with implementation, but then have an official acceptance of what we're doing and how we're doing every 2 years. And I think that's a very important change in this plan, and I think it will be effective to keep everybody focused in on land use decisions. As you heard me mention moments ago, one of our guiding principles has to do with schools. And we've not had that as such a focus in our plans in the past, but because they are such a driver of land use decisions, and because that is such a hot topic in the community at the moment, we believe that it required its own section. And that's a new thing that we haven't done before. Another thing that we talk about in the plan is frequent planning meetings. So where we have our regular planning and zoning meetings that you hear about on Tuesday night, we want to have regular meetings that are just about planning. So in the plan, we've committed to at least quarterly, I believe, quarterly. So I suspect it will be more frequent as needed, but that is a minimum. Again, when you read the implementation, you'll see that everything kind of moves towards the commission. They will have these frequent planning meetings and then report up to the RTM. So it's a hierarchy in that sense. And of course, as I've mentioned several times now, I think that this community, the big innovation here is you all. I mean, it's a plan that is written by you, and we really did such a strong job in the beginning of trying to get comments from you. And the Land Use Committee, the RTM in particular, has been wonderful to meet with regularly, and they've been instrumental in help guiding the plan. And I think that is reflected in the quality of this plan. Just want to talk quickly about the implementation. We do have a decentralized form of government, meaning that, as an example, I don't report to the first selectman, I report to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So one might think, well, how's that going to work then if there's a lot of requirements in this plan, and how do we make sure that there's accountability? And frankly, there's a lot of accountability that is written into this plan, and I would suggest that you read that back section about implementation, because that's the section that's changed the most in the drafts since we put the first one out in August. What's changed is that we've spelled out how the accountability is going to work within the implementation matrix. So as I mentioned, we have these objectives and action items. You'll see that in a big table in just compiled area at the back of the plan. What we then did was we took all of those objectives and action items and we put them into 3 different categories. One is a priority action item. The second one is a vision action item, and the third one is education. So the priority action item is one that is a checklist, effectively. Like, you are accountable to this X department, and you will do this within the priority scheme that's been established. So for me, in planning and zoning, 2 quick, easy ones are the sign regulations and the landscape regulations, which are reported in the plan as areas that need updating. So that's something that I will be reporting in these quarterly planning meetings to the commission, and I'll be saying, here's where we are with that, and then we'll be reporting that to the RTM. The example of a vision action item will be something like having events in the downtown. So that's something that we do now, and we want to keep promoting that. But that's not something where I'm going to say, did we have 8 events, 10 events, how many was it? We don't have a measurable in that sense, but it is something that is for the vision of the community. So if one says, should we do another fashion show, or a town party as an example? Yes, that's something that the community wants, and that's something that is good for our land use plan. So that's an example of a vision action item. Then lastly, we have the education action item. So part of the role of town government across all departments is a role of education. So there are certain areas where we call that out, such as the value of historic preservation. So those are ongoing things that are not prioritized because they're ongoing and will be done annually, the vision and the education. The priority action items you'll see are split into 3 time periods. And again, those are, quote, the checklist. Overall, though, from an umbrella standpoint, the plan gets implemented through those 4 things that I mentioned in the beginning. Through the budget process, whereby each year the capital projects that are put forth through the selectmen's budget have to show that they have considered the plan of conservation and development. Our zoning regulations, the commission statutorily cannot act on a zoning regulation unless it's determined that it complies with the plan of conservation and development. Municipal improvements, that's the finding that they are making when they move one forward, that it conforms to the plan, and with grants. And so once that's the umbrella, then we have under that the action items that are either priority, vision, or education. We have a plan implementation committee that is comprised of myself, the Director of Environmental Affairs, the COO of the schools, Director of Parks and Recreation, the Commissioner of Public Works, and the Town Administrator, and they will meet regularly to make sure that those action items are being completed. They will report to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who will then report to the RTM. Again, if things aren't going well, then we'll know that, immediately, and we'll be able to do something about it within that 2-year period, which was the point of wanting to make sure that we have these regular check-ins. So the next steps from here are, obviously, we want to hear your comments. And again, thank you so much for coming, and we're looking forward to hearing those. I am traveling to Hartford tomorrow, where we have our consultant, so that I can take your comments from this evening and several others, which I will mention at the end of the evening. So in case you're still interested, you'll be able to hear them. But obviously, you're here now, so we want to hear your comments. And I'll be making the revisions to the October 22nd draft. Then we will be putting that forward, ideally, to the RTM at the appropriate time, whether that's for the December 9th or based on your comments tonight, a subsequent future meeting. But that's the plan as to where we are now. So with that, Madam Chair, unless there's something from the commission.
Anybody want to add anything? No? Okay.
So with that, I would just
So
say,
let's rock it.
if one wants to go up to the microphone, and then someone wants to kind of get in line behind, that way we can
Or just
move
sit and
forward that
wave
way.
your arm and I think I know most of you. So who would like to start with comments? Peter Berg, okay. Good.
I don't want to go first.
Well, you know, you're a B.
And the gentleman over here to your left is our court reporter. So when you go to the microphone, if you could please say your name and maybe spell it depending on the complexity of your last name.
It's only 4 letters. Peter Berg, B-E-R-G. And good evening. As you know, I'm chairman of the RTM's Land Use Committee. But for the most part, I'm not speaking in that capacity. I would mention, though, at our last meeting of the Land Use Committee, I expressed concern about bringing this plan to the December RTM meeting because the December RTM meeting is the very last meeting of the current term of the RTM. So it doesn't seem appropriate or fair to the newly elected RTM members, many of whom talked about the POCD in the League of Women Voters Guide, to deny them an opportunity to be voting on the new POCD. And I have expressed that concern to the moderator. Having said that, not in my capacity as RTM, even as an RTM member, just as an individual. There is much that I like in this draft. I like the focus on the downtown and on the Post Road corridor. I like the emphasis on attracting new families to Greenwich, and the acknowledgement that we need to create more housing for seniors to get them out of our single-family houses. That includes my wife and myself. We're empty nesters who are perfectly happy to stay in a single-family house where our taxes are low. I like the inclusion of schools in this plan for the first time, and it's consistent with attracting new families to Greenwich, and that's both public schools and private schools. And I applaud the development of the KPIs, the key performance indices. I look forward to seeing them and participating in their development.
Good.
So I think the plan is bold, but I don't think it's quite bold enough.
Oh, okay.
I would point out, and then you won't hear anything that you haven't heard from me before, but I'll just point out that Greenwich has not acquired any open space. In the last 20 years, we acquired Pomerantz-Tuckman, which was very significant, but that was a long time ago. And you would not know that from this draft. Yes, we opened Coscob Park, but we already owned that land. And during the last 20 years, much land has been subdivided and developed. There are very few large, high-scoring properties left in town. Yes, the Aquarian land on Lake Avenue, which apparently is currently available. The Rockefeller land that stretches from Glenville Road over to Glenville School, and Copper Beach Farm on Indian Field Road. These parcels, I think, need to be called out. The Pomerantz-Tuckman and other properties that the town acquired were actually called out in the open space plan, I'm going to say, of 1998, and then the town proceeded to acquire them. And by not by not calling out significant properties, I think that they are much less likely to be acquired. The plan notes that our population, this is number 2. The plan notes that our population is aging in place. I just received the Commission on Aging's Age-Friendly Greenwich Plan just today. It's an impressive document. The state's official projection, as you know, is that due to aging and our shrinking household size, our population of Greenwich will drop by a whopping 20% by the year 2040. I've said that a number of times. You have, many of you have doubted it, but that state projection is scientifically developed. It is not mentioned in this plan. It is used for state grants, such as library construction grants. I know you don't believe it, but I don't think it's appropriate for you not to mention it in this plan. Our downtown, as you know, has lost over 40% of its population since 1960. And that loss is a fact that few long-term residents of downtown believed until they were shown U.S. Census statistics. You would not know that from this draft plan. Our total population has held steady, but people, as you know, what we did is we sprawled. So our population of mid-country North Miami has grown, but the population of our downtown shrank. So we hear constantly that people oppose increased density in town, but shouldn't they be opposing reduced density in our downtown? As our population shifted away from downtown, our retail stores and restaurants have morphed into luxury retail and fine dining. Instead of a destination for residents, our downtown is turning into a tourist destination. Is that what we want? Why not repopulate the population of our downtown? Transit-oriented development. Well, that term just came up in an application that's before you. It's not a new term, but I was delighted to hear it, as Marguerite had pointed out to me. Our state, that term does not appear in this plan, and I believe it should. Our state senator just wrote in a policy document that she just sent out that transportation policy is equal to climate policy. 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from cars. Freight trucks add another 23%, so that brings the total to 83%. People who live in apartment houses and other multifamily buildings are far more energy efficient than those who live in single-family houses. Yet few of our residents live within walking distance of our railroad stations, not only our downtown station, but Cascab and Riverside. And I know Ms. Albin lives within walking distance, but shouldn't the plan address that? I note that on page 56, you have a beautiful photograph of Lafayette Court, which is a 6-story building in our downtown. There are a number of 6-story buildings, but currently I'm told the limit is 4 stories. I'm not suggesting 6-story buildings on Greenwich Avenue, but I don't understand why we're not calling for more 6-story buildings in our downtown that would allow a greater population, particularly for seniors, to get them out of the single-family houses. So I will finish with that note. And I will, Katie, I'll send this to you in an email tonight or early tomorrow.
That'd be great, thank you. And I just want to make a comment about your first comment about why we're moving through in December. And it's just a natural progression of the plan, but more importantly, this plan, as I've said a couple of times, was written by the community, and the RTM is representative of the community. So whether someone's new or not new, they are supposed to be representing their district and the voice of the town. So I think whether it's right now or next month, that representation should be there. So it's not the individuals necessarily.
I hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Baker. And you still have to tell the court reporter who you are, even though we know you.
My name is Sue Baker. I'm on the Conservation Commission and the Shellfish Commission for the town of Greenwich, so I'm passionate about all things conservation, and particularly open space. So, Peter, I just want to point out one thing to you. You're right that we haven't for 20 years bought anymore. But the Conservation Commission and many of our local town partners do a lot to preserve open space without buying them. So to call out something like Copper Beach, we didn't have to buy it. The town didn't have to buy it. It's privately owned and it's protected just by arrangement. And to call out other privately owned properties, the town doesn't have to buy them. We have many ways in place, including the Greenwich Land Trust and other private owners, foundations, that do protect those. So they will be open space. So I don't think it's fair to criticize the POCD on that aspect of it. I think rather than just spending millions and millions of dollars to acquire them town ownership, as you say we did for Pomerantz, and we did, and to keep Coscob Park as is, it is open space except for artificial turf. But we did own that already, and we're doing really good things with a lot of other spaces that are open and that can and will remain open without being owned by the town. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as, and it doesn't really, I mean, you cited three things, the Rockefeller property, Aquarium, and Copper Beach. We will keep those protected without spending millions in the town budget to buy it.
Anybody else?
Hi, hello, I'm Wynn McDaniel.
Hi, Wynn.
And hi, Margarita. I have just a quick question on something that Katie, you had pointed out about the, I forget exactly what it was called, a 2-year check or checkpoint, or is that something that's happened in the past? And
No.
If I didn't think so. So what is the objective, that to look at the whole document and then
Yes.
see if there are things that need to be changed?
Yeah, because otherwise we stop for 10 years, and we keep talking about it for 10 years. And we owe a lot of this to Dennis Yeski, who's a fairly new commissioner, and he kept saying to us, the world changes, and you're not integrating that into the planning as you go forward. So we've never done it before.
Okay.
And so if we find that there's significant changes, the idea is to come forward and say, hey, we need to look at this as a town. That's one of the reasons we weren't that worried about the change in the RTM composition, because it's going to take some of those people a while. And then if something changes or they're uncomfortable with it, well, we're going to have enough meetings that they're going to have a chance to, we're not going to freeze this.
Good.
It's the idea is to keep it flexible
Alive.
and alive,
A live document.
a
So-
live document.
And as you see changes, you could incorporate them.
Yeah.
Will that still need to come back to the RTM, or is that,
Well, we were thinking, yes. that it would
Absolutely. No,
come back
yeah,
before you.
The town charter notes that it's only the RTM who can.
You're the final authority.
Can approve the plan. So it's not a live document, so to speak, until the RTM takes action on it. And that would be with any revision also. So until the RTM takes action on a revision, it is. So right now, the 2009 plan is in effect.
We hadn't thought through something like, okay, so we look at it in 2 years and nothing much has changed. Do we still come to the RTM and say, hey, guys, nothing much is, that stuff we hadn't really thought through, but you're the final say.
Okay.
So your decision on that.
I think that's great because it's like you said, 10 years is a long time and a lot could change.
A lot has changed when you look at it.
That's true. So, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Win. Anybody else? Hello.
Hi, my name's Andy Deuce. I'm a member of the
Hi,
DET.
Andy. And thanks so much for the input that you've given us.
Wasn't much. It's a very attractive document. It looks great.
You know that most of the pictures are actually
Pictures are
taken.
fantastic.
They're taken by Greenwich residents. They're not from a consulting firm. They're mostly with the permission of one of the Facebook pages that
You should mention
peop-
that. I don't think you
people in
mentioned
Greenwich post to. A lot of these pictures are taken by people who live here.
that. I'm trying to think back, why are we such an attractive place? And we have been for many decades. and
Yes.
Hopefully it will continue. And it's good schools, it's for lots of reasons, proximity to New York, but also it's the way we've been managing ourselves for decades
Yes.
in terms of being very prudent fiscally.
Exactly.
And that was the number 2 reason on the Realtors survey. But other than upfront saying that we have a very low mill rate, we don't really say much more about it. And I don't know if it's really appropriate to say a lot in this kind of document.
Yeah.
But I just noticed one thing tonight that caught my eye.
Okay.
There are some things in here that cost money,
Yes.
and we just may want to rethink some of these things perhaps in the future at some point. For example,
For example.
page 134, support the Nathaniel Witherall. It's a great asset. But right now, we've had a subcommittee of BET called the Nathaniel Witherall Strategic Planning Committee.
Okay.
We've made no conclusions, but we have no preconceptions, and we're still doing data and research, and hopefully we'll come out with something in a couple of years, I hope. My next term. Anyway. But this doesn't strike me as something that's part of planning and zoning.
How could we word that? What we really want to say is we have an excellent skilled nursing facility and rehab facility, and we should continue to have something like that because it's an asset for the town. So from a land use point of view, doesn't have to be run, it doesn't have to be financed by the town. That's
Yeah.
not our call.
If I could just for a sec, we have actually amended the way it was originally written per an excellent comment from someone in the audience. Actually, I'll let them call themselves out if they want. But the way it reads now is support the Nathaniel Witherall as an asset that should be retained. It used to read support the Nathaniel Witherall as a town asset that should be retained. And so this person correctly noted your point, which is don't butt in where you shouldn't be butting in, and rightly so. And so to Margarita's point, based on the history of how Nathaniel Witherall came to be and the requirements of that property, et cetera, and the fact that it is an asset within the community, but we took out the word town to hopefully address the point that you're raising.
And the other thing is that we tried to stay away from any specific, for example, there are some people that want to build a stadium behind Town Hall. That may or may not be a good idea. Our statement is we need we need to continue to improve our athletic facilities. How that happens, we don't think is our call. At this stage of it. It's just to say, hey, this is the general goal, but that we should not go with specific, the town should do this specific asset, because that's also driven by the budget considerations that you're representing here.
It's a very tough process, and I appreciate it. I just still want to make sure.
Yeah,
mindful
agreed.
that one of the ways we got here is that we've been very prudent. in the
Yes.
past.
And we wanted to leave that space that we would recommend the broad idea, but that how it gets approached financially is decided again by the entire community when the time comes, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
In the past, by the way, past plans would recommend specific things, and we disagreed with that because we thought it was not planning and zoning's decision entirely. That's up to the BET, it's up to the RTM, and it's up to a lot of other people. and not, it's a consensus that we should make at the time, if that makes sense.
That makes good sense. I also have one other observation, which, again, just struck me tonight when I heard for the first time that this might be a process that might be ongoing every 2 years,
Yeah,
revisit it.
we told you, yeah,
There's actually a value doing it every 10 years, I
Right.
think, in that it gives you some distance. I mean, when you
Yeah.
do it every 2 years, it's a continual process, and that may risk losing the forest for the trees.
we may not change it,
Okay.
that's my thought. Yeah, I mean.
I'm speaking metaphorically, but that's okay.
Yeah, you said it, you said it in the wrong audience. They'll defend every tree there is. And we may not change it, was our take, because there is something good about having a guide and having something we refer to. But if there's a massive change in the world, like the recession.
Sure, be responsive. I'm also concerned for the staff. This has been an arduous
Yeah,
process.
yes.
If you do this every 2 years, you're gonna
Staff
increase
was concerned. Staff
Okay.
was concerned.
Okay, well,
So we're going to try not to torture them.
thank you all.
Thank you very much, Andy.
On your first point, though, I do think that it does speak to this whole idea of these more focus on planning, and actually to your second point, too. So if you recall, when the Planning and Zoning Commission met with the BET, and we talked about the commission's role on land use and the BET's role on the financial end of things, and making sure that we do meet more regularly and that we are aware of each other's bailiwicks, so to speak. And so I think that was part of the whole point behind the push towards planning, is really making sure that that conversation is had more regularly, and then noted to the RTM, who the document ultimately belongs to in that sense.
I'm speaking for my colleagues, I'm looking forward very much working more closely with you guys, and I'm also looking forward to getting a flow chart for the MI process. That's on my to-do list, anyway.
I think other people would be interested in that, too.
Thank you.
Right? Thank you very much. Hello.
Hi, Jude Collins. So I'm a little confused. On page 52, you talk about affordable housing stock, that it should be 10%, which I understand.
Right.
But then under moratorium, you say it should be 2%.
For the moratorium. Go ahead.
That's state statutes. So what they do is, under the 10%, that is 10% of your housing stock, so number of units. And under the moratorium, they have this housing unit equivalent points business, and that's where the 2% comes in. So they have a calculation ours happens to be 512 is the answer to the calculation.
But then how many do we have? Because it makes it look like we only need 500 units, and I thought we needed 1,000.
No, that's not, that's, yes, then we will amend that to, it's the housing unit equivalent points, it's 512 points, not housing units. So we are,
So what's the correlation, or?
so right now, we have approximately 200 or so housing equivalent points that are very easily trackable, but we believe we have more than that, that are much closer to that 512, that we are now currently working on as a priority to get to the full 512. But it's not housing units, so
So,
it's,
okay, here, I'll tell you what. To give you a specific example, if you build something that qualifies for 830G affordable housing, if it is at 80% of the state median income year rent, you get half a point from the state. If it is at, I might get these a little wrong, if it's at 60%, you get 1 point, and if it's at 40%, you get 1.5 points. And you have to have X number of points in total in your basket in order to get a moratorium. Does that sound like state government to you?
Then how many points are we short?
I don't know exactly.
So I guess what I'm saying is maybe.
We're trying to, our issue, I'm going to be totally frank with you here. The issue is what the housing authority has can or cannot be counted, and we're working that out with the housing authority right now. So we don't quite know how many points we have because we're not sure where they are.
But on the private side, the ones that the Planning and Zoning Commission tracks, we have 70 points. So the ones that have been constructed by private developers, so Byram Shore, the Pembroke Apartments, in other words, units that have been constructed privately, all of those
One's Ham
together equate to 70 housing equivalency points.
So I'm just concerned about putting a point schedule in when we actually don't know where we are, so it kind of looks.
Well, well,
close.
the point of putting this in here is that this is what our numbers are. We need 512. That's not,
That's what we need
that we know.
Now, but in 2 more years, there'll be another census, and then we'll have another number to reach.
Right.
But by then we'll have, hopefully, we'll be done with the moratorium, and once it's in place.
I mean, it was, the point of this, of putting this in here is that, it's part of the statutes and it's part of what every community has as options. I mean, you have to, there's this 10% threshold. If you don't meet it, then you're subject to the 830G
I guess
regulation.
Darien and-
the normal question is this is where we have to be and where are we now?
Yeah, and Darien and
Right.
Westport have moratoria in place. Westport has been sued and won once, and it's being appealed again, and I believe Darien also won the lawsuit, because of course, those kind of communities get a moratorium, it raises, but they've won it, so when we saw that it had been working fairly well for them, we started looking at this. We're also adding, we've been trying to legalize units in Byram and all over, especially there were some in Byram that we just legalized, but all over town where there are illegal units that are affordable, we've been trying to bring them to code and legalize them. So we're adding little by little, so even as the number goes up, we should be okay. And can I talk about what we're doing? No, well, wait, we're going to do some regulation changes that'll also maybe affect how we count those in the
So will we
future.
have a number by the time this is published, or we're just
No.
going to leave it?
We're
out
going to
there?
leave it out there.
Okay,
Is that cool with you?
all right.
Okay, thanks, Jude. Somebody else?
I just would like to know, just talking to the commission, a previous draft had the chart actually in it where it described the point system that Margarita is referring to, and it was requested that we take it out because it was too much information and boring. So I'll just note that. I don't know what the commission wants to do, if they want to add it back in, or maybe just one sentence that notes, something like what you just described.
Okay,
Okay, good. Thank you.
yeah. And just don't say, and the chair got it wrong when she described it. That's how I remember the
Yeah,
chart.
yeah.
I could be off, but I think that's how the chart goes.
Margarita, one question is study that some of the neighboring communities have done, and whether, in fact, that's something, Katie, that you said is underway.
Yeah, we've reviewed all of the other towns' analysis, and actually, we've worked with the Department of Housing and looked at their analysis of their application. So we know, what to do and how to do it, and it's just, as Madam Chair was saying, it's just the unknown is how the housing authority units can help us. But I will just note that
If
even though
that
the
seems
house.
weird to people, it's because I know, you guys were all frowning like, what? How could you not know? Because they counted them for the federal government. And now and nobody ever went back and said, so can they count for state? Because that's not what the housing authority was
Well-
counting, because they were being financed by, go ahead if you
Yeah,
want.
it's specific in the statute. So number one, it's everything constructed post-1990. So that knocks out the vast majority of the housing authority properties. And it leaves the town hall annex, and 3 or 4 others, which is escaping me at the moment. And once you have those units, then it's only units that are defined as assisted housing under the state statutes, meaning they constructed those units through either federal or state monies. So there are certainly units that can be counted on the housing authority side, but the impact of those units per the housing equivalency points has not been calculated at this moment, so I don't know exactly the number, but I do know that it gets us pretty close, if not at the 512. Just guessing, based on
Okay.
looking at those.
Okay. Now that we've made you guys crazy. Ms. Alvarez.
Francia Alvarez, Alvarez. First, thank you all. This is a terrific document. There's so much information in it, and I know how hard you've all worked on it. And
Thank you, because you contributed as well.
well, thank you, but I really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. So I have just three little quick items. I know you're looking for any little detail that might not be right, and on page 123, there's a extra space line in between a paragraph. So I just wanted to make note of that for you. So we've been talking about housing, and I wanted to find out, in the document, it states that at Nathaniel Witherall, there are 75 units of housing there. Are those units counted for anything? Are they counted in, do we get any kind of credit
know.
for
Katie?
workforce housing or anything?
No, the workforce. Excuse me, sorry, the workforce housing doesn't count towards
Okay.
affordable. And a comment that we have received from the public did ask us to put in the overall tally, which we have and will do. So what you're talking about, the workforce housing, there's 25 units that are constructed. The state affordable housing that's done on the private side, that's 23 units, so that doesn't include the housing authority. The accessory apartments, although it doesn't count towards affordable, it does count towards that hidden housing that I was referring to. We have 91 units that are elderly, meaning that someone 62 years of age or older has to live either in the main house or in the apartment, and 16 units that are affordable, meaning that they are deed restricted to a certain limit based on when they were constructed, not to get into too much complication. So those are the numbers that we plan to add into the plan.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is you have this whole section on the schools, which, as you said, is the number one attraction for people moving into town. So you've broken it out by public schools and private schools. And I think it's interesting, I added up the numbers. The public schools have 9,113 enrollment, and private have 4,994. So public schools represent 64% of the schools, and private are 35%. And that I thought was an interesting number. And with the private schools, what percentage of the students that go there actually live in town? Is there any, knowledge or
Yeah,
material on
we
that?
didn't put that in the plan, but we have gone through that with each of the private schools, and it's the majority live in town, the vast majority, actually, in all of the situations.
So it's the schools, both public and private, that draw people here, and I think that that's an important factor
Yeah.
that you might want to
Yeah.
make a note of. Okay, great, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez. Anybody else? You want to come back? Oh, good. You can't let Peter Berg talk twice within an hour, no.
Do that. We can't do that.
Ms. Messina, you have to identify yourself.
Joanne Messina, and first I want to speak as an individual and a citizen, and this is really outstanding. I have been involved in the last two, and the difference is monumental. Again, I also know the work you've put in, and love seeing things like tree preservation as objective number one. But no, I think it's always been a plan that some of us who have been conservation-minded have viewed or looked at, but others have sort of put it up on the shelf. And I see it now as a document that I think the majority of residents will look at and continue reading, because it's easy reading. And I think it's very clear and concise, and really, really congratulate you all on this.
Thank you.
As Executive Director of the Tree Conservancy, I do want to say that we're really excited about some of the objectives here. We're very excited about the 2-year implementation looking at, because something like tree inventories, tree preservation, tree canopies are dwindling very quickly. So I think for plans of conservation and development, a 2-year look and implementation is really key. And we are very much interested in assisting in any way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More people? Anybody else? Sir?
Hello, my name is Aldo Pascarella,
Hi, Aldo.
Pascarella. Thank you for your good work on the Plan of Conservation and Development. I'm, in addition to being an attorney in town and a newly minted member of the RTM.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited. A real estate developer. And I was pleased to see the emphasis on multifamily development and affordable housing. But I haven't been following that closely, but I understand there's also been a moratorium put on those sorts of development.
Only on the workforce housing, because we have a regulation that was giving incentives on the workforce housing, that's sort of town employee kind of people. And there were some things about it that just were creating confusion, honestly, because people didn't know when they came in whether they would get what they were asking for. So we want to make that clearer. We also felt that we made a mistake in not tying the incentive to the FAR of the underlying zone. So we're going to link it more, we think, to the underlying zone. It's going to be very short order. We're already, Katie's hard at work drafting the changes. So we stopped so that we could come back out with something that's more predictable.
Well, great. Actually, that was going to be my request, because
Awesome.
when we take the time and money to put all the
Yeah.
plans together that we have to show you guys, and there isn't clarity
Right.
in the rule. And frankly, when neighbors come and make specious arguments
Right.
that don't have any merit and hold the whole thing up, it's money going to a process that could be better spent on the housing stock itself.
Well, we're going to do something, a second thing that we're really excited about that we're hoping is even better. For certain very large kind of projects, we're going to do what the state statutes permit us to do, which is to talk to people before they've even submitted the application. There will actually be a hearing, no public comment, but the developer will be able to come in and say, I'm thinking of putting up a 15-story building in the backcountry. And then we can say, no, that's just really not going to ever work. Or, you know, something that is going to work. We're thinking, what did you say? 3 questions the developer can ask where they really have some doubts about how it's going to fly.
Great.
And then they'll have guidance on the general project before they've even filed it. So you don't get somebody spending X thousands of dollars. We owe a lot of that initiative to Andy Fox, who is also a builder. And he said
He gets it.
He got the problem. So he was the first one to suggest it. And when we saw the state statute, we're moving forward with that as soon as we can.
And that's a very quick 20-minute conversation with the commission just to answer a question about, is this the right direction? It's not a drawn-out conversation, because under that scenario, there absolutely will be public comment.
You don't get
Desire.
to talk about drainage and, it's just a rough sketch. Here's what I'm thinking about. Any input.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
And then the moratorium, when 6110 comes back, it's going to be a little more clear cut.
Thank you.
And just to clarify on the moratorium, even under the moratorium, one can absolutely still build multifamily, one can absolutely still do moderate income, just not with the incentives.
It's the incentive that's on hold.
Right, but
The FAR
from
height and what
My
have you.
understanding of these things from talking to developers and crunching numbers on my own projects, the state statute and
The state one is very unkind.
it also is on you can't
Yeah, I know.
profitably build in Greenwich.
Right, we
and
know
make
that.
that work.
But our statute works right now, and we require 20% of area median income based apartments, which is much higher than the state median income.
Good.
I think it's about $50,000 a year in income higher. Is that about right? 77,000 versus 100 and something.
Great. And I had mentioned 2 other thoughts the last time I spoke to the plan in draft form. One was regarding, these short-term rentals, Airbnb and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe the need for some clarity.
Yeah.
With regard to regulations.
I think we're going to
in
end up
town.
having to do that. We're seeing is that people are beginning to address it. Pretty much every town in Connecticut started out by being silent and seeing what happened. And now we're seeing people begin to regulate it.
Yeah. I think,
So
again.
we're
just-
watching it. We were reluctant, but we know there's a fair number of listings in Greenwich. We do follow it, and we know that they're out there. We've had very few complaints,
Good.
but every now and then we get a complaint about fighting in a parking lot or something. Not what we want in town.
And then the final one, and this is just a
Yeah.
little more in the future, but I'd mentioned previously the idea of working something in here around parking requirements to the degree that autonomous vehicles really do come into use before the next plan of conservation.
We
and
mentioned
development.
it, but we figure if there's a huge surge in that, we'll update it in a couple of years. For example, that would be something, but we're also in the middle of a really big parking study.
Oh, good.
So hopefully that'll be, Katie? Parking study?
We've done it's part of a much bigger overhaul of our commercial zone regulations. It also deals with the definitions and with use groups. So we've started with public comments on the definitions. We have the parking section written, but it's such a significant undertaking that we're kind of focusing here. And then we'll, as soon as this process is over, we'll ask the public for help on the parking part. Because we do need public input on it because it is such a significant overhaul.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, you all, for your service
Thank you.
to our town. Thank
Now,
you.
do you mind that you won't get to vote on it because you're not on the RTM
I
yet?
do, actually. I think
Okay.
I think Peter made an excellent point, as he always
Okay.
does.
All right.
I think it would be great if
see
we
how
could
it
kick
goes
this
then.
into the new year.
But we have your input anyway. That's what we were figuring, that everybody's been talking to us.
Well, but not everybody is available to show up, for a hearing
Yeah.
like this on a weekday evening, given the press of other business in this time of year. So, and there is, I think, a new spirit forming in the RTM with this election. It's going to be a very positive one for the town.
Good.
So to the degree that the new members can weigh in on this, I would encourage you to wait.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Collins,
Jude Collins. A quick one, page 105, letter C.
you're proofreading while you're sitting there. That's cheating.
Oh, okay, well, review traffic around Greenwich High School. Why only the high school? I mean, Coscob has a horrible traffic problem.
Katie,
Elementary.
Why did
Sorry.
we say we would only review the traffic around the high school and not some of the other schools?
New Lebanon has bad traffic.
Oh, Coscob is terrible.
has horrible traffic going around the back.
Ham Ave, don't even go there. Yeah.
So I guess it's page 105, letter C.
Oh, thank you.
I don't remember seeing it before.
Oh, the action item 105.
No, it's,
Oh, page
Page
105,
105.
sorry. Oh, because that's what we heard from the public, actually.
They
well,
were
that's
more
because more people go to high
No,
school than
it's-
go to
and-
other schools. But
And also because there has been, there's been such a problem there that a task force has been created. We've met for 2 years. This is post-MISA. It was a requirement that certain traffic improvements be done and that monitoring be done. There's actually been a traffic study which would be discussed as part of this task force. So there's considerably more issues with the traffic around the high school than there are with the other schools. So that's why it was called out specifically here.
any way to put the other schools in?
What do you think? I don't mind. I think that's a great idea. I'll tell you one thing that did you guys see the article on Uber in Greenwich High School in the paper this week? We've been hearing about that because everybody's complaining about traffic and all those new cars that we're seeing in town have New York State plates. It's Uber goes and picks up Joey and takes him to tennis practice after school. And that is bigger in the high school. It's big.
But it's
a
also in the
huge-
high school, you have to be a lottery if you're a senior to get a ticket. I mean, to get a parking, be able to park.
No, you don't, yeah, so, but Mom doesn't go pick up Joey.
Right.
Uber goes. No, not to be picked up by an Uber. No, I know a kid who's not 18, and I know for a fact that Uber regularly takes him to tennis. Okay, I guess they're not checking.
Well, we could add other schools maybe, or put a footnote, or,
I think it's a great idea because I started out with being enraged about the speed in front of the Coscob School, as you know, because it
and
scares
when
me
you have
that.
to pick up, you have to go the roundabout, it's hard.
Yeah, and Ham Ave, you can get stuck for half an hour waiting at pickup time, I know.
Okay, thanks.
So, thanks, Jude. Okay, so go back to proofreading, we'll keep talking. Anybody else?
So
I want to include the other schools, why not? Yes, I think we should, I think he's right. I mean, at the time, people only focused on the high school, but we have a problem around a lot of the schools. Ma'am,
So, hi,
you
my
need
name,
to, yeah.
my name is Jane Sprung, and I will be a new RTM member.
Congratulations
Thank
to you
So
as
I hope-
well.
I hope you, anyway, I look forward to it, whatever you decide, but hopefully January is when.
Well, you don't, guys, they don't have a January meeting,
Or just
right?
after-
They don't have a
whenever.
February meeting.
I'm new,
Okay.
so excuse my,
Okay.
questions, but I just had a question about providing historic preservation incentives to all homes in local districts, and I was wondering if that has anything, I live in backcountry, is anything related to the,
You're
the Mel
getting-
Gibson, how the,
Yeah.
is that, no?
No relation to that situation at all, actually.
Okay.
And you would have to create a local historic district first
Okay.
in order for that to even make sense, which that Mel Gibson area is not a local historic district.
Okay.
The idea is to have continuity within that district, so it's not just for the historic homes. There's only a few of them, but that had nothing to do with that area. None of them actually, well, I think there is one in the backcountry that's off of Stanwich. Yep.
Yes, that's right. Yes, there is.
That's it's other side of town.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks.
That was my question.
But there are preservation incentives for, if you have an individual house and you're going to develop the lot and you want to keep the house, you get an FAR incentive if you
Right.
preserve the structure.
Right.
It's just the district, the actual historic district. We'd love to see more of them if you
Okay, okay.
want to
thank
work
you.
on it. Anybody else? Sir? Come on over, you have to go because it's a hearing and all that.
Trey Reynolds, District 2 leader. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a quick question. I was at a meeting just earlier, and people were talking about the IHOP, the patio.com that's vacated.
We don't know. We've heard rumors.
Okay.
I love the Shake Shack rumor myself.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about.
But that's actually a zoning regulation issue. That wouldn't be something that was in the plan per se.
But if
So
we knew somebody
specifics-
was going to ask us something like that, but we've heard a lot of rumors, affordable housing, Shake Shack, Trader Joe's, you pick them.
Right.
Some of them are very cool, some of them are less cool. We'll see what happens.
Well, they wouldn't let me out of the room until I promised that I would
That you would
ask.
ask, okay.
All right,
But
thank you.
that has to do with the specific site, whereas this is a more general vision document.
Okay, very good.
Anybody else? Okay, Peter Berg. So I think a problem with downtown is that there are a lot of people who live there who don't list Connecticut as their primary residence. A lot of those people who are now downtown aren't listing Connecticut as a residence. So it's very hard to know how many people live downtown because a lot of the new development downtown is second homes for folks.
Yes.
So it's very hard to know who really lives downtown. And that's why we've sort of sidestepped you a lot of the time on the question.
Yeah.
Because there's so much housing construction downtown that it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of housing that's new. Mason and Millbank have a ton of new housing. And yet, what does your census say that people don't live there? And there was no way we can find that out. We're hoping we can get a better grasp on it in the next census.
So a couple points right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my reference to repopulating the downtown was to having. I'll say,
Regular human beings.
Permanent residents.
Yeah.
Okay? I wondered why that shopping center up in Banksville was doing so poorly. And somebody said, well, it's because so many of the residents in that area are not permanent year-round residents. So they don't, they're not there to shop. If we have permanent residents in our downtown, then you would see the retailers and the restaurants start to reorient themselves to residents, not to tourists.
Right, and it isn't just tourists, it's, how do I say this in a non-discriminatory way? It's the age of the people in place, to be honest with you. People with young families are full-time because they're in school. as people become empty nesters, they may have a second home that they declare as a primary residence, both the backcountry people as well as the downtown people. What we need is an influx of young families and the right housing for them, and that we have identified. And they're going to want to have access to the schools. So that's where we need to make housing for them.
We do have a few families in the downtown.
I know we
who
do.
have children
Peter
in
Quigley
school.
stands up Dan Quigley
Yeah.
stands up every time we mention the topic.
So I wanted to respond briefly to a couple of comments that were made. To Ms. Baker, I am not aware of any restrictions on either Copper Beach Farm or the Rockefeller property. So if she is, I'd like to hear about it. Now, the Aquarium property, we know is heavily restricted, but the other two, I don't know of any. To Mr. Deuce, I think there should be a statement in the plan that specifically says this document, this plan of conservation and development is not a financial document.
Right.
It's not appropriate to talk to, I don't even think it's appropriate to reference the mill rate, which it does currently on page 13. It's simply not a financial document, and the BET is our financial board and controls what we can afford. But this is supposed to be a vision for the future of our town. I would also point out that with respect to about reviewing the plan every 2 years, it is significant that we have a census coming out in 2020. I think that's going to reveal additional shifts in population within the town of Greenwich that could be very significant. So I think at least until we get through that 2020 census, it's a good idea to be reviewing the plan. And I share his concern about the MI process. You've heard me before talk about that MI process. I do believe it needs to be clarified. And I'm concerned about any process that sort of allows the Planning and Zoning Department to sort of approve sketches in private. The more public the whole process is, the better. Having said that, what we've been urging is to somehow split the MI process from the site plan process, and I'll continue to push for that. Mr. Pasquarelli talked about autonomous vehicles. I was at a car dealership today where the chief salesperson was saying that the day of having car dealerships with large inventories is ending. That increasingly you'll be able to go to a car dealership, specify your car, and you'll have it in weeks.
But it won't be autonomous necessarily.
It won't be autonomous. It's just that the point that I was making is that.
We can plant trees in all those parking lots.
Yes.
That'll be great.
Yeah, you may well have.
Greenwich is going to love that.
Right.
This town likes its trees.
Yeah. Ms. Alvarez mentioned school enrollment of over 9,000. There's a brand-new enrollment report out. Actually, it's not out, but it will be out, that shows that our enrollment has dropped well below 9,000. There's a big sixth grade moving through, but when you see that enrollment report, look at the first, second, third grade, and you will see the future of Greenwich population dropping. I mentioned earlier the Commission on Aging's age-friendly Greenwich plan. That plan, they sent it to me today.
No, but we met with them when they were in draft, and it's integrated into our document. We
Right, it's a
integrated
great, and I think it's a very great effort. It just points out that, yes, our population is aging in place. I just point out to Mr. Collins's point about the Cuscop School. The last plan specifically called for the town to acquire land around our schools. There's a significant property next to Cuscop School that's on the market that could help relieve the parking there. I would like you to see that goal put back into this plan.
We're not putting any specific projects in
Right,
this.
I'm just saying
Yeah, no specific project.
I'm not calling for that specific property,
Okay,
even though I did call for open space properties to be called out. But we should be acquiring, I mean, the private school, as you know, when a property next to one of our private schools becomes available, they just grab it right away, just like your colleges and universities do. Our public schools need to do the same. I think that's my final comment.
okay.
I do just want to note, you made an excellent point about the public and this new process. So I want to be 100% clear on this, that we've not put forth a regulation having to do with that section yet. We are planning to. It is noted a lot in this plan. We are still working through the specifics of it. The reason that other communities don't have public input, so that's what Madam Chair is referring to, because most of them don't have public input. The reason being that it's a tiered system that we're looking at. Again, this is in its infancy, so I don't want anyone to get too worried about it. We're working through it, and of course, any zoning regulation has to go through a public hearing process. The idea is to set up a tier where one could come in and ask the commission, do you like the direction I'm going? That would be this new process we're talking about. Then it would be the preliminary application process that we currently have, where you have to provide more information, meaning drainage information, traffic information, but not at the same level as you would have to for your final application. So to Mr. Pasquarella's point, it's frustrating to come in and to spend all this money on drainage reports that may be moot if you don't like the project and don't like the direction. So we're trying to set up a tier. How that works in practicality and in the regulation is to be determined. So we're still working through all of those issues. And the land around the schools, you kind of hit it on the head, that the people who are taking advantage of that are the other private schools. And as I was noting before, this business about the high school and all the traffic, and given that it's our only high school and it's in the plan, why can't we buy land around the high school? And if you really look at how practical that is, it's not practical really around the high school because of the cost of the land. So the town always has that option to purchase land and sell land. Obviously, there's a process that you have to go through in order to do that. So whether or not that's in the plan for a specific use, I think one can do it anyway through that process.
Well, it would be helpful if the plan pointed that out.
The process for something like that? or-
Pointed out that the private schools are acquiring adjacent lands, but our public schools have not done that. We certainly could have done that for Hamilton Avenue School. We certainly could have done that for New Lebanon School at reasonable cost. In both cases, we didn't do that.
But we could have, and we could do it going forward with some other instance.
So I'm just pointing out that it was helpful to at least have that statement in the 2009 plan, so
I
please
got
put
your
it
point.
back.
Yep.
Thank you.
Margarita?
Well, no, you can't ask questions. I'm just kidding.
You can't see me down here.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just to, again, Peter, I think the suggestion on that pre-review of a project is not intended to reduce the town's review or scrutiny or public review. It is really just to kind of smooth out the process and eliminate the potential for the expenditure of, lots of money and waste, and to give some kind of indication up or down whether a project is at some extreme. So I don't think there's any intention to reduce the public review or to deprive public say in that matter.
Sure. So, Peter, I fully understand. It's just that there are a lot of residents who have very sensitive antenna around what goes on, privately between developers and town officials that they wonder about. So we just need to be careful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No question. No discussion that is not a public hearing, no interchange. The public would not speak, but it would be a fully noticed public hearing. There would be an action, a summary of what we've done. We don't talk to developers on our own.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, absolutely, we
you
are
heard-
100% committed to transparency.
And in
You got to
fairness, we
trust our
have-
system. If we can't build a system that people trust, we've lost the value. I mean, that's what it's about. So I hope I didn't plant any doubt in people's mind that we were going to do stuff in a back room with a developer, because that would destroy what the town has going for it.
And in fairness, the commission as a whole hasn't even discussed that topic as to whether or not it would be open to the public or not. I mean,
Well, the
it's-
public would come. I
Well,
mean,
no, that's a given, but whether or not public would be able to speak, we've not discussed that really as a
no,
commission.
I mean, we just wanted to keep it short because we don't want the developer to go down a rabbit hole and then think that they've got a project approved. Just to the general concepts, and then they come in with a real application once they have a sense of our heading on it. But there's stuff that we've hated and has been so far down the road that it's been like pulling teeth to get it revised. And that's what we don't want to see happen anymore, where it just takes weeks and weeks of hearings to get a builder to change something because he's already spent $100,000. So before he does that, we want to say, hey, you're going to have a problem with us on this. This isn't what the town wants to see happen.
Those are the ones that tend to end up getting lawsuits involved too, because he's way down there and we're arguing that you've got to change, this is not what we want.
Yeah.
So part of it is just to minimize the legal arguments we end up in too.
and, you know, I almost felt badly for,
62 Mason?
no, for Mr. for the Ashforth,
Railroad station.
you know, because that, you know, but you had residents saying, hey, you know, where did this all come from? It just seemed to land from outer space, but, you know, because some of that was done sort of quietly. So, again.
The
it's-
commission, though,
No,
not
I
before
know,
the commission.
Yeah.
No, Peter, I want to make a point here. I mean, that
Yes.
did come out of the blue to us also. So that was not, we didn't see it before the public saw it,
I
quite frankly.
understand. Yes, and so I didn't mean it that way, but thank you.
We're trying to mitigate that issue. We don't want things to seem that way.
Mm-hmm.
And by having an open process that allows people to come in to ask questions before they actually commit to anything, I think is what we're exploring. But we don't know what it's going to be like. We're just speculating at the moment. We haven't completely vetted this.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay.
Can I just add some comments that I've received
Yeah,
over email?
we've typo fixed, I know that. Is that what you're going to talk about?
No.
No, okay.
But I will note it, thank you, that there's several commission members that have gone through the document, Peter Lowe, Margarita Albin, and Victoria Goss, and that's to correct all the grammatical issues. So if you're like, no, it should be a comma there, hopefully we caught them between those. So there's a whole bunch of things like that. There's comments that I've received from the public. I just want to note them since I think they've been viewed favorably. One is from Svetlana Wasserman from District 10, where she notes in Objective 4.2C, which reads, create an energy commission to implement a coordinated effort to reduce energy consumption in town buildings. She wants to add "and schools," and it continues, and to promote means for the community to follow suit. Do you mind if I read yours, John? Okay, page 25, item 2, this is from John Eddy. Third sentence, there's last quote, "and" should be omitted. This is just grammatical things. Page 72, 4.2, second line, drain untreated onto should be drain untreated water onto. There's a comment from Ann Young in the historic preservation section saying that there's some redundancy between D and F, and therefore, for F, you can remove the last sentence saying, identify candidate to become eligible for the National Register, since that was already captured in D. We received positive feedback from WestCog, which is the Western Council of Governments, which is our regional planning agency. If you note at the very end of the plan, there is a section that notes compliance with state and regional plans, which is a requirement under the state statutes, not under our charter. So even though we 100% followed the charter as a courtesy to the state, so to speak. We've added that section in, but it is not a requirement under the charter. Anyway, Westcog states that the overall the goals and priorities set forth in the plan are consistent with those in the Southwestern Regional Planning Agency's Plan of Conservation and Development and the draft Western Connecticut Plan of Conservation and Development, which is currently in public comment and will tentatively replace the Southwestern Regional Plan in January 2020. Congratulations on an exemplary plan. She does note that on page 21, clarify that Greenwich is one of 5 Connecticut municipalities ranked silver. She believes that's now up to 9. Make that point clear. She says also on page 21, it's unclear if 95% of the zones are residential or 95% of the parcels are zoned for residential use. It's the latter, so we'll make that clear. She also notes that 5G technology will start rolling out in early 2020, so it's not really a very long-range technology as noted in the plan. Andy Duce, who spoke earlier, notes on page, and this is cut off in the executive summary, which is page 11, on the second column, it refers to property taxes. He wants it to say property tax rates. And then on page 12, on the first column, again, very low mill rate, and he wants to add the word high financial stability. Louisa Stone notes that on page 51, she asked that we rotate the graph of town employees to match that of the Board of Education employees. The percentage of those who live outside town is the same for both groups, 60%. It would be more clear if town employee graphs were rotated 180 degrees. Diane Fox asked that we include the name of the actual 5 scenic roads. Just so you know, that's Sawmill Lane, Cliffdale, Bering Hill, Buckfield, and Selden Lane. She wants those noted in here. She also wants to note how many historic overlay and HRO zones there are that exist. She liked to see, while the pictures of the villages are nice, she would like a small map labeling the villages. She was asking why there's a picture of all the police when that section refers to the Board of Ed employees, but I would just note that section is actually referring to all town employees. That's the section that that Louisa Stone is referring to also. She asked that we include the affordable housing and moderate income numbers. Those are the ones that I read previously. And lastly, she says, while the zoning chart is helpful, the actual zoning map would be good because this generalized map does not indicate the actual residential or commercial zones. And that is all of the comments I've received over email on this draft. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yep. And I think just in talking to the commission about these various comments, the only 2 that I read that I'd understood you did not want included were maps of the villages, just because the boundaries can get controversial sometimes, as we noted when we went through the neighborhood plans, and also because they are in the neighborhood plans. And also that the photograph is referring to, it does show the police, but that section is referring to all town employees, not just the Board of Ed employees. So there was a thought that that picture was okay. Happy to change it if you like.
Okay. All right, so we're good to go? And there's no further public comment, and if the commission doesn't want to add anything, we could close this. And then, are you guys ready to vote on it? All right. All right.
So just for the record, Dennis Yeski will be voting for Nick McRae, who's
Yeah,
not here.
so Nick is not here, and Dennis is seated for him. And because Dennis has done so much work on this plan and has been so dedicated, heart and soul, we are going to ask him to make the motion.
Al?
Now,
This is my reward for working on the plan. I get to read this.
so if you hate the plan, you know whose fault it is?
Yeah, Margarita Albin? No. Whereas, in compliance, this is going to take a while, folks. Whereas in compliance with Section 92 of the town's charter, the Planning and Zoning Commission has prepared and adopted a, quote, plan of development of the town, known as the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development, based on the studies of physical, social, economic, government conditions and trends, and is designated to promote the development of the town and the general welfare and prosperity of its people, along with the present 2009 Plan of Conservation and Development, does not represent current issues and conditions and needed to be updated. And whereas this draft plan dated October 22nd, that's still right? Was posted in the town clerk's office and on the town's website. And whereas the commission received comments on these draft plans at the September 19th, 2019 public workshop, and the November 12th, 2019 public hearing from the public, community groups and town agencies and boards. And whereas the editorial comments noted at the public hearings will be made on the draft, and the draft will be presented to the RTM at their December 9th, 2019 meeting. And therefore, be it resolved that the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development dated October 22nd, 2019, in the form filed with the office of the town clerk and presented at the Planning and Zoning public hearing is thereby adopted with clarifications and corrections and errors and omissions, and a copy thereof shall be certified in the representative meeting for its approval in compliance with Section 96 of the town charter. I learned that from Katie. Speed talking. Be it further resolved that the following plans, amendments to earlier town plans adopted by the commission and approved by the RTM are incorporated into this 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development by reference, and these items are: number one, that the planned housing design designation on the Post Road from the Mianus River east to the Stanford border and from Edgewood Drive west to the New York border, an amendment to the 1964 land use map and plan, and number two, the open space plan of 2002, these are things included, an amendment to the 2009 Plan of Conservation and Development, and number three, the Grass Island Master Plan of 1990, incorporated into the 2009 POCD also, and the last, number four, the sewer boundary map of 2000, areas to be sewered, an amendment to the 2009 Plan of Conservation and Development. Period. End. Do I? Second?
Okay, so before do I have a second on that?
I second.
Dave, okay. Now that we have a motion forward and seconded, the only question is, do you want to go ahead with the December 9th at the RTM, given that we have had some questions about it?
Maybe Peter can answer this. Peter, I think the first selectman comes in on December 1st. Does the RTM come in on December 1st, or is it next year? The new RTM?
Technically not supposed to.
30 days.
January 1st.
No, 30 days from election day.
Okay, let's keep it for December 9th, and if we're not clear that, okay. And hey,
And just also.
the point we didn't make about why, another reason, the current seated RTM has helped us enormously. A ton of people have written and helped and contributed, and this is their legacy also, and it's another way of looking at it. And hopefully the new people will contribute and feel the same way, but in 2 years they'll have a chance to change it.
And yes, 2019. And frankly, if the
our hope,
RTM
too.
doesn't want to vote on it, that's their choice.
That's their choice. Okay. So with that.
And one other point. Throughout
Not
the
really
next.
supposed to talk to the public as much as we are once we've done the resolution. You
Only-
know how I
okay.
I know we cheated.
I was going to point out, Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
that this doesn't stop on December 9th. There is a series of planning efforts that will be going on, hopefully with new members of the RTM participating on that. So they will be immediately incorporated into the planning activities.
And some of those task force people are here now, tonight.
One would hope.
No, they are. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, all those of you. Some people left, but all the people who were here tonight, we have been talking to for a year and a half, most of you, and we are really, really grateful for all the help, all the input, because you shaped where this went and how it's written. You guys know how you shaped it because you've recognized your own words in here. And also, as I mentioned, Andy Deuce, we have resident photos, and they're gorgeous. They really are. So thank you, and thanks again to the whole commission for all the work you've done so far. Hopefully, we're nearing the end of it. And thanks to Katie.
And Katie.
And thanks
And
to Katie, and Steph. All right, and with that, we will adjourn.